Right, we are live.
Hey, hi.
People are joining in. I think people may be coming from the previous chat that ended at 11:15 and jumping into this Zoom because we're still at 5. Yeah, the last meeting is running over. Somebody just chatted. Good morning, everyone. We are just going to let people trickle in a little more and give it a couple more minutes before we get started with our brunch. Good morning. Good morning. I'll let everybody flow in here. We'll be starting in a few minutes. Get comfy, grab your brunch, make sure you're set up. Okay, it looks like we're at a solid count here and everybody has rolled in. So we are going to go ahead and get started. Good morning and welcome to day 2 of the 45th annual Alfred L. Edwards Conference. My name is Briana Jones and I'm an MBA 2 here at Ross. I hope you enjoyed the powerful, insightful discussion last night with Angela Rye and Kalani Abbey. I know it gave me everything that I needed. I'm so excited for our brunch today and even more excited to welcome our keynote speaker this morning, Ms. Roslyn Karamoko. Roslyn Karamoko is the founder and CEO and ultimate voice behind Detroit is the New Black. Roslyn received her BA degree in fashion merchandising from none other than the illustrious Howard University. She would then go on to work as a retail buyer for several years in New York and Singapore. The cultures and experiences she had while traveling influenced many of her designs today. Called the Motor City's hottest designer by Time magazine, Roslyn has effectively created a conversation on the past, present, and future of Detroit, its underlying socioeconomic racial issues, and the city's steady revitalization, all through the five-word statement, Detroit is the new black. Everyone, help me in welcoming Ms. Roslyn Karamoko.
Oh, hello. Thank you for having me. That was really exciting. Thank you for saying all those things. Thank you. Appreciate
Of
it.
course, of course. It's so great to have you here this morning and super excited to just jump right in. So, we've heard the bio, I've given a high level overview of your journey, but you've had an incredibly dope career. We have to dive deeper into the details a little bit. Can you walk us through your career journey and really how you got into this point so this far?
Sure. My story it's been a windy path, to get to Detroit, and um, it's been incredible. And I consider myself, I guess, a little bit of a cultural nomad and kind of just bouncing from city to city, seeing what's needed from me and what I can contribute to that space. And so originally, I'm from Seattle, Washington. Like you mentioned, born and raised there. Started my retail career the summer after high school. I started at Nordstrom, the flagship downtown, which is kind of like retail culture in Seattle, and really just knew that's kind of what I was meant to do. And so I went on to Howard, majored in fashion merchandising there. Hey, it really got the full Howard experience. I pledged there, I pledged AKA, I cheered there. I really wanted to fully, tap into what an HBCU and what Howard specifically had to offer. After graduation, I moved to New York, and I didn't really have plans or an idea of what I was going to do specifically, but knew that was really where fashion happened and wanted to just get my foot in the door where I could. So my first job out of college was an internship at Sean John. Bad Boy. It was kind of the same at the time. And so I was like a stylist assistant, and I would just kind of run samples and, be a fly on the wall as they were developing Sean John and kind of taking urban wear upscale, going from streetwear to more high-end suiting, and just kind of a different perspective or a luxury perspective around urban wear. So that was my first job in New York. And then after doing that for a few months, I needed money, and I needed to be really working. So I got an entry level role in the buying office at Saks Fifth Avenue, and I was a merchandising assistant. Was kind of where you started, and then you get into this buyer's training program, and you're going through this rotational and planning and buying and really learning sort of the ins and outs of the buying office. So eventually I became, a buyer in women's outerwear. I was there for about 5 years. And then I really was interested in getting a more global perspective around buying, customer, retail, fashion, and wanted to go abroad ultimately. So I sent my resume to a recruiter who was based in London at the time, and I was recruited for a position based in Singapore. I had never been. Didn't really know much about that part of the world, but really open again to that experience. And so I moved to Singapore. I worked as a retail consultant, buying international brands to basically bring into Southeast Asia. So this was buying, across Hong Kong, Australia, Vietnam, Malaysia, just different parts of Southeast Asia, and really getting to know those different customers and their lifestyle. So some were Muslim-based countries, some were, Christian-based, some had more income. So it was really trying to determine what brands fit here and what is this customer really responding to. So I did that for about a year and a half, and then moved to Detroit. So I know, so really random. So my ex is from Detroit, so it's always a boy, and followed him out here, and
It happened. It happened.
it happened. But I think life takes you where you're supposed to be, and so I came to Detroit in 2013, and it's just a really interesting time in the city, and things were changing so rapidly. And I was really excited to be here, and had an idea, put it out there, and it kind of just went from there. So that's been my journey.
Wow, that honestly is so incredible. And I really, I got to circle back to Howard just briefly. And not just Howard, honestly, but HBCUs in general. And this idea of intentionally seeking Black spaces, Black people, and Black community. What has that meant for you? And really, what has it meant for you in not just your life, but your career thus far?
It's meant everything, for me. It's been a real game changer. And I think an HBCU for me specifically gave me a window into broader Black culture. I'm from Seattle, so it's not like I'm coming from a Detroit or from, Chicago or a Black city, a DC or something. So this is me really being able to expand my perspective and how I relate to people that look like me. And so I made that choice intentionally because I felt I already had the other perspective. I had a diverse perspective. I went to a majority white high school. So I wanted to be immersed, kind of in that other side. And so going to Howard, was a culture shock in a lot of ways, but it also showed me that Blackness is not necessarily singular. And within Black culture, there's a vastness and there's an expansiveness that allows space and individuality, within the culture. So it was really welcoming to feel like, Blackness is however you show up in your skin, and it was really important for me to see that and have that perspective to be able to create a brand like Detroit is the New Black.
Yeah, and I love that you said that Black is not singular, because so often we're looked at as this monolith. And that like we're going to a HBCU isn't necessarily a representation of the real world or what the real world looks like.
Yeah.
And that's a phrase that, what has resurfaced a little bit. Kind of now that it feels like at least we have that solid proof with Kamala Harris being in the White House right now that, HBCUs, they prepare you more than anything.
Yeah.
So what is your response to that statement that HBCUs don't prepare you for the real world?
We're moving towards a new future, and that question feels a little bit dated. And I think, it's the implication of that question is really that HBCUs aren't competitive, or it's a bubble that isn't necessarily, like you said, preparing you for a diverse world. But again, it's all about perspective, and depending on what you're looking to do in the world, and network that you're looking to build, and professors that you're looking to access, you're really learning a culture. I believe that you go to university not just for the academics. You learn that culture and the people and the environment that university incubates. And so, if what you're going to do in the world ultimately requires that perspective, I think that's how you think about university. I have a good friend who went to Harvard Business School, and she's like, they teach you how to be a white man up in there, and it's like that's what you learn. You learn even if you're wrong, you learn how to argue it, and you learn how to show up confident, and you learn how you to project confidence, and so it's not, always the academics that you're going to a school for. You're going there again to learn that culture. And so if you feel you need an Ivy League culture because that's the confidence or that's the energy you need to go into finance or these other things, I think that's really how I think about academia and university.
Yeah. Well, clearly your HBCU set you up for success.
We did okay. And I have a fashion merchandising degree. So it's like, we come out swinging, and it's because of that network, and it's because of that confidence. It's because of that support system that you feel buoyed by, in the world. That you have classmates that are going to support you and that are going to promote you and that are going to like push, you forward. And so that's really what I got from Howard. So I'm so grateful. And Kamala's basically my line sister. So
there we go. There we go.
No big deal. I'm going to call it no big deal.
So Detroit is the New Black.
Yeah.
Talk to me about the intentionality behind that phrase. Yeah. What does that mean to you, or what does it actually mean? And really, how did it come to you? And what level of confidence did it take to make such a bold statement at a time where, frankly, America wasn't checking for Detroit, and they weren't really hip to the power and cultural riches of Detroit at the time? So what did that take?
So Detroit is the New Black. It's it's so loaded. It's really a loaded, statement, and it's triggering, and it's a double entendre. It's all these things. And moving here, like I said, I moved to Detroit in 2013, and I remember Whole Foods had just opened, and when I saw that, I'm like, oh, Whole Foods, if they're here, it's happening. Like it, I was in Harlem, before Harlem changed. I was in Seattle, before Seattle became, tech central. So just knowing these sort of indicators on how a city is about to gentrify or change. It's like, this is happening. This is a Black city historically. How does that impact this Black community, and what is the future for this community going forward? And so thinking about, again, the history of Detroit and it being founded by the French. Um, it was actually built on the fur trade. So they were coming to Detroit and exporting fur back to France. So even that, thinking about Detroit being founded on fashion, or there being some historical reference to trade and that sort of industry in Detroit. So Detroit, this accent over the E, it's a real thing. I didn't make it up. So it's like thinking about this rebrand. I'm coming to Detroit. My friends and family are all thinking, oh, Detroit's so scary, and why would you move there? And I'm really excited to be here. And I'm here, and I'm seeing the culture, I'm seeing the artists, I'm seeing the opportunity. So it's like, let's rethink about Detroit. Let's imagine it as Detroit, or this cosmopolitan sort of international city. And then it really starting to come alive, once again. So the new Black, obviously this overused pop culture phrase, but somehow when you put Detroit in front of that, it takes on a racial undertone, right? And it starts to trigger thoughts of, well, what does that mean? And where are Black people in New Detroit? And what is the true opportunity for this demographic of people? So it was all those things. And I just kind of thought of it one day. I was out at this networking event and I was seeing all the, beautiful brown people and artists. I'm like, oh, Detroit's the new Black, like this is happening. And so also, coming from New York and having friends that worked in finance or tech or media, even, it's like these people were in places of power and also had a lot of money. And it's like, if all of you to Detroit, and bought up a block or set up a business, or like there could be so much impact here. So it was really just like this smoke signal, like, come on, y'all, like, let's bring our resources here. Let's do something in the city where we can actually make change and move forward for our people, as opposed to being in these cities where we're getting on the wheel, and we're chasing it and we're making money, but we're not necessarily seeing that immediate impact for the full diaspora. So it was really kind of that thought and all those things running through my head, and that's really how the brand was kind of thought about.
Yeah, and I love that. And I think sometimes as Black people, we have this sixth sense, and we can sense the power in something before the rest of the world is able to see it. Because honestly, that's who we were. We knew our strength, we knew our power before the world was here to say and to really agree with us. So to know and to sense that early, and really be able to put forth such a bold statement like, hey, I don't care what y'all say. I don't care that you don't know about Detroit right now, but Detroit is the new Black. And look at where we are today.
And and it wasn't always well received. At the beginning was rough, and it was interesting because it was people were triggered on both sides, white and Black. White people were like, well, who are you? And how can you say that? I'm white, I've lived here all my life. Is it for me? Can I participate? And so they were triggered. And then Black people, like, you're not even from Detroit. What's the new Black? What about the old Black? We've been here. So there's all these emotions that are rising from the history and the hurtful history of the city. And so it really was like an effort too to kind of bring those things to the surface and heal. And how do we take this energy and channel it into a new experience of this city, and one that's positive, and one that's hopeful, and one that's optimistic. So again, it wasn't always well received, and I wanted to make sure that coming here as a transplant, that I did it with intention and I did it with sensitivity, and really listen to the community, in terms of what they need. I didn't just want to come here and sell some t-shirts or sell some goods, like make money. It's like, what is this really about, and how is it really moving, the people in the future of this city forward?
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about the business model and the structure of Detroit is the New Black. So last night we heard from Angela Rye about the notion of leaving a legacy and ensuring that, if you're the first, you're not the only. And really this idea of opening doors for other people, particularly people that look like us. And I feel like you've done that very well with your business model, in that it supports opening the doors for other businesses. It's not just you in the store. You have other companies. What was the intentionality behind that decision and in opening up Detroit is New Black to not just you guys but to other companies?
Yeah. So, again, I started with the t-shirt, and that kind of took, and it started to get some traction. And when I opened my first pop-up in 2015, I, you know, quite frankly, didn't have enough to fill up the store. I just had a few little shirts, and that's what it was. And I knew a lot of creatives. So again, just the community locally that I was inspired by, this is really what birthed the idea, the concept of the brand, and the aesthetic of the brand. So it was, taking my buying background and merchandising background. It was like, how do I merchandise this full conversation? We're not just having a conversation about someone coming to Detroit from these other cities and projecting this perspective or this vision of the city onto Detroit. It's more about what's already happening here and what's coming into the city same time. So it's like that full conversation, just made sense to start to um, merchandise and incorporate other brands in the space. And also, from a cost effective standpoint, brick and mortar is really challenging. And so going into a different retail future, that idea of a co-op, or a pop-up space for brands that just are dropping, different models. You're not really having full season collections. You're dropping monthly and then you're out of there. So it's just like creating this system that's really built to kind of go into the future from a larger retail standpoint. So that was really how I thought about the business model. And so over time, it formalized into sort of a retail accelerator where we take applications to be in the store. We select about 5 applicants every 2 months, and they come into the store. We staff it, we merchandise the assortment, which really helps them to build out that retail, I guess, display and sort of conversation. What does the brand look like in the store? Is the pricing right? Are your margins right? How is the customer responding to certain products? So it's a test sort of incubator for those brands. And when those 5 brands in the accelerator don't pay rent, they're in there for free. We pay them out 100% of their sales. So it's really just an opportunity for them to test the market. And then ideally, going forward after those 2 months, if their business is working, they'll move into a rental model, and now they're part of that formalized co-op. So that's really sort of the retail piece of it. And then more recently, we started to run programming with Boys and Girls Club, where we bring in the high school students from the Boys and Girls Club every Tuesday and Thursday through the week. And we're teaching them different retail merchandising skills. So we do workshops around business planning, around visual merchandising, around branding, and sort of building logos, and just helping them to build the concept of their business and have the tools to really launch that into the world. So again, activating the space beyond retail. How can we engage the community beyond just selling them goods, is really kind of what we've done with the space.
And then in addition to that, there's really this emphasis on the experience of the space, right? Like it's not just not just the retailer, it's an art gallery, it's an event space, it's so many other things. And I think this idea of inviting the community, not just as like other business owners, but inviting the community in to not just shop, but be a part of this experience is amazing.
Yeah. I think we have to do that. And it's like we don't, for me, when I look at stores like Macy's, big box retailers and Macy's, Target, it's like they're incorporating some Black brands, but it's not coming from our perspective. And it's not a space that's built for us. The music doesn't sound like us, it doesn't smell like us, it does, the art is not us, you know. So it's just like, how do you create that full experience that just encapsulates our culture, you know. And you know, I've not been able to do that without certain partners that have really supported these different community events, whether that's art exhibitions, network events, wellness events. You know, we've really had the support of some key partners in Detroit that have helped us to move it forward.
Yeah. So with this emphasis on the experience, we got to talk about COVID-19.
Uh,
And I know. But the impact that, you know, on a brand that is the in-person experience is so critical and such a foundational piece of the brand, of the company. How did you see the community show out and show up for you, your business during this time of COVID-19 when it completely flipped the game for you and so many other people?
yeah. Um, you know, they've showed up. They've purchased online. You know, they've inquired in terms of what do we need. We've gotten increase from Black marketing agencies or different businesses that want to help to push us forward online, knowing how much of our business is done in store. And you know, we've also been able to show up and use the space differently as well, you know, because foot traffic is down, because, you know, the store sales aren't what they were, or we're not utilizing the store specifically for the retail. We're able to now open it up almost as a boys and girls club, or almost as a space, you know, through the week for the youth to get a different exposure or a different perspective. So it's being able to pivot in that way. And it's like they're showing up for us and showing us that space is needed, and they want us there. And so we have to be able to use that space in a different way to pivot into what the community, you know, really needs. So that's been really a blessing, you know, to be able to kind of just turn on a dime and do what the city requires.
Yeah. And now thinking of the future of Black entrepreneurship, not just your business, but Black entrepreneurship as a whole. I think this summer, at not just COVID-19, but you know, Black America this summer and right now, and honestly, so many years throughout this country, you know, we're finally at a place where it feels like our voices are being heard, at least a little bit, from Kamala Harris to Stacey Abrams. You know, Black women specifically feel like they have the floor. Black businesses specifically are garnering attention in a way that is very new. People are buy Black has like completely exploded as a hashtag. We saw this holiday season. I'm sure your business saw it, you know, an influx of support, not just from the Black community, but so many other people trying to finally be a part of this movement. Um, as you think about retaining customers, but also building community, how do you ensure that this remains a sustained movement and not just a moment in time?
Yeah, I think Black business owners have to be intentional about their ownership and what that means and where that dollar goes, right? And if people are buying Black, that's great, but that means the business owner has to be putting that dollar back into the community and building that idea of cooperative economics. You know, it's not enough to make a few you know, Black billionaires or you know, some more Black millionaires. It's not enough to have just some more successful entrepreneurs if Flint still doesn't have water. You know, I think we have to start to close that gap between like that talented tenth of those that are able to access business training and business understanding and build businesses, and really close that gap to, you know, poverty stricken areas of Blackness, and those that don't, you know, that are consuming but they don't have the education or they don't have the tools to get there, to maintain their own businesses in their communities. So again, I think it's about really looking at what Black ownership means. You know, I teach these kids from Boys and Girls Club, and they were talking the other day, you know, we got to buy Black. I buy Off-White, you know, it's owned by Virgil, but you know, exactly. So it's like The concept is there, the concept is there, and they understand that it's time to buy Black. But do we know who owns Off-White? It's
Mm-hmm.
not Virgil Abloh is marketing, and he's the creative director, and he's the face of. But when you
Mm-hmm.
buy that brand, do you see a return on that in your community? On
Mm-hmm.
the east side of Detroit, does that move you forward? Does that help you? And so I think, again, we have to really consider what are the brands and the businesses that when you purchase it, a piece of that dollar is actually going towards a community, or that entrepreneur is using their expertise and their education to bring someone with them, and I think that's what we have to start thinking about as Black business owners. There's a huge responsibility, in that. And so thinking about how do we build businesses that are more vertically integrated? How do we own supply chain? How do we own distribution? Not just the marketing, not just the branding of it, buy this, but you're buying from white supplier, or you have to pay, a white landlord or whoever it is to distribute your goods, or you have to get into one of these major retailers that really controls your margin and controls the success of your brand to be successful. So I think that the next step to buying Black is really building Black, from an infrastructure standpoint, and that full ownership. And it's hard. It's hard. I own 100% of my business, and um, it's it's challenging, because you don't have certain infrastructure or different things. But I really, it's important for me to be able to do with my profits and my revenue what I want to do with it, and that ownership of myself, and my voice, and be able to say what I want to say
Yes.
and move how I want to move. It's like that's freedom. That's freedom. And so I think we have to, as Black businesses, move toward freedom, and not create a business to be trapped in, which a lot of times can happen, through fundraising or partners or all different kinds of things. So
Yeah. And I love that because you ultimately are the voice of Detroit is New Black. And you can say that wholeheartedly and fully being 100% owner of the brand. And you mentioned, oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
but I do want to acknowledge that I've not done it alone. And so I do have
Mhm.
partners, not equity partners, but I do have partners that have been able to support certain parts of the business that I couldn't do alone. So in Detroit, I have a development partner, so Bedrock, who ultimately owns the space. And so this is, the largest development sort of company here in the city, owned by Dan Gilbert. And so that's a really important relationship, and again, proving this model or this need for a business like this, is supporting them. We're creating marketing, we're getting national, attention. We're creating foot traffic downtown. We're capturing a different customer. So for them, there's this mutual benefit, for us to be in the space, or for them to maybe subsidize or support us being in that space. Boys and Girls Club, is another one who's been a huge supporter of us, and us being able to create this programming or be able to offer these entrepreneurial courses or this exposure and access to some of these youth that may not be able to access the resources that are kind of funneling into what they call the 7.2 miles downtown. So that's sort of this downtown, midtown, Corktown, sort of these new hip areas. And so that's where these entrepreneurship programs or federal dollars are going to really support the new Detroit. But how do the kids from Boys and Girls Club, in these different parts of Detroit, greater Detroit, how do they get access to those resources? So for BGCS or Boys and Girls Club, we've been able to bring them down into the fold, and give them access. Pure Michigan Business Connect is another one of our partners. So statewide, Michigan, Pure Michigan, they really support connecting suppliers to big box retailers. So this is, us being able to bring forth more minority creators, minority businesses that may be able to plug into their larger distribution network. So these are different partners, organizationally, that have really been able to support the work that we're doing. So it's not, me doing it alone, but it is having that voice at the table, that's not being moved or being necessarily influenced by some of the other things that might be going on.
Yeah. You made this powerful statement that it's not just about buying Black, it's about building Black. and you've been able to do so incredibly well. What's the future of Detroit is New Black as you look even further down the line?
Yeah. Um, I love experience and I love brick and mortar retail. And I just there's something about walking into a place and just having a moment and feeling seduced by the energy there and just wanting to buy something, and that's something I'm passionate about us having for ourselves. And the media will tell you that it's online, everything's online, invest online, but really, almost 80% of shopping is done in store.
Mhm,
Honestly.
mhm,
So
mhm.
it's a huge opportunity. And I think it's a space that we've just not been in historically. And so when I think about this model, how does it translate in Atlanta? How does it translate in Oakland? How does it translate in these other cities where you have this large creative class of Black entrepreneurs and Black creators, and being able to aggregate that Black dollar and be able to sell that to our communities while also supporting our communities through educational programming, funding opportunities, different things that are going to move those communities forward. I think that really is what I'd like to do. And I don't know if it's Oakland is the new Black, or I don't know if we're doing that. But I think, again, I think the concept really translates. And so
Yeah.
it's figuring out again what's unique to this city or to that city, and what do we need, on a hyper local level, that somehow aggregates to something mass market. So that's kind of what um, I'm looking to build,
Mhm.
and again, it's building that supply chain for the in-house brand, because there's really two different things happening. There's a sort of a retail and a distribution piece of it. And then there's a brand, which is its own moneymaker, almost a private label type concept. So it's looking at, from a brand standpoint, how do we start to build capacity and supply chain and sourcing, that's really sustainable and that's really putting back into the communities. And also from a retail model, how do we build this system that can then operate in other markets? So that's kind of what I see for the future, and what I'd like to work towards.
Yes, and we are so excited for you and to be a part and support that experience and that growth.
I'm excited to be here, and I think, everyone who's on this call, you all are some of the most brilliant Black minds in this country, and cities like Detroit need you, and our communities really need you, and a brand like mine needs you, quite honestly, so it's like really looking at, how can we again start to bridge that gap from the very looking at our own Black privilege and what we've had access to and been able to do. How can we give that back, and not just in dollars? How do we give that in time and an experience, and an education? Like it's so important, and that's the only way all of us, will be able to move forward.
Yeah, and I love that you say that because there is a level of privilege. I know for me specifically, and a lot of times we talk about it here at Ross, this Ross bubble. And I think a lot of schools that are in major cities experience the same thing where you kind of get locked in this bubble of going to class and doing, your day to day. You don't realize that there's a whole another city, or there's a whole city of people and businesses that's moving while you're still here. And I think it's something I've been trying to be intentional about, and I really hope that we can make it a sound message today and inspire and encourage people to be intentional about really bridging that gap between Ross and Detroit, and between all these other schools and the cities that they lie in, because that bubble is very real.
It is. And and like, even in the way Howard was a cultural shock for me, like Detroit was
Mhm.
a culture shock. And I came here, I'm like, oh, like the t-shirts were $30. I'm thinking it's cheap. I'm coming from New York. I'm like, it has to be at least 60, to be considered something. And I'm, selling these to communities at markets, and they're like, a $30 t-shirt. Girl, that's, it's like we could get this for 15 or whatever, whatever it is. And so it's again just that perspective, or even the
Yeah.
question around do HBCUs prepare you for the future, or that, even that's like an elitist conversation, like if we're honest, there are areas in a large demographic of our people that are, really blessed to get to college, whether that's community or otherwise. And so it's just like really understanding the core issues and like the mass conversation of Blackness and like where we actually are as a people collectively, I think is something that we have to really be intentional about understanding.
Yeah, 100%, a hundred
Yeah.
percent.
Yeah.
So the theme of this conference is the uprising, reclaiming Black voices in business and society. What does reclaiming the Black voice in business and society mean to you? What does that look like?
Um, again, I think it's building systems and circulating our dollar that's moving us from consumers to owners. I think that's really like what reclaiming that voice is. Like we've got to move from being the marketing and the sale, the selling component to businesses, and really starting to control our destinies and control the aggregate of our buying power. Again, going back to sort of the vision for Detroit as the Black ultimately, and what does this store look like in other places, in other cities? I think about in the same way we have food deserts, where there are certain areas that only have McDonald's or only have these certain um, poor food choices. It's like there are fashion deserts or like retail deserts that, in these places they're only getting rainbow or and not that
Yeah.
that's or things that maybe aren't the best quality or aren't the best
Mhm.
options, aren't sustainable options. We're talking about sustainability in fashion, and is that even accessible, to our people in certain parts of the world? So I think it's just reclaiming what that Black narrative is, and really being open to expand maybe our specific view of what Black success looks like. I think we have to be open to a perspective beyond the culture or this blanket culture that we've been projecting, through media. So
Yeah, 100%. So, what we're going to do now, we're going to open up the floor to questions from our audience. So, if you guys want to, or if you all want to raise your hand, I will bring you on to the stage. Shout out to Clubhouse. Bring you onto the stage and allow you to ask your question. So, feel free to raise your hand. And if not, I could throw another question at you.
yeah, yeah.
Let's see. Oh, here we go. Nicole, I'm gonna bring you on here.
Hi, good morning. Thank you so
Hello.
much for being here and for such an amazing conversation. I really loved your comment about off-white and buying black.
No
um,
shade, no shade, but
yeah, you know what? I get it. I volunteer with high school students who are also kind of working through that logic and that question. And I was really curious, how do you have that conversation with those kids in the Boys and Girls Club?
yeah, I encourage them to research and just encourage them to think a little bit deeper. It's like I can correct them and I can say, "Oh, that's wrong. It's actually owned by New Guards Group," and Virgil was paid for his creative direction or whatever it is. But I asked them Google it. Is it owned by Virgil? Go ahead and Google it. So they throw it into Wikipedia or whatever, and like, oh no, it's owned by New Guards Group, and you see them kind of like, wow, that's crazy. It's like Instagram has told me this, but when I actually look into it, it's this. So it's like giving them the tools to be able to dig a little bit deeper and not just take what they're receiving or the information or content that they're digesting, not to take that as fact, because that's across the board, right? It's not just in fashion. It's just like they are they've been groomed on these social channels that they just believe to be factual information. So my approach is really teaching them how to think, teaching them how to research and dig a little bit deeper, so that they're making more informed purchasing decisions, and just going into the world a little bit more prepared, so that's how I handle that. And I don't want to be old Roslyn haterade, it's like I'm old enough to be their mom. So it's like I don't want to just come in bursting bubbles, but it's like let's dig a little deeper and kind of get the full story on what we're actually supporting.
We have another question here. Okay, Joy, I think you are up.
Hopefully you can hear me.
Yes, we can hear you, Joy.
Hi, Joy.
Thank you both so much. This conversation has been amazing. I am also a recent Detroiter, moved here about 2 years ago and actually lived a couple blocks away from your downtown location. So this is like a dream to see, to hear you share. And I just wanted to reflect on the comment that you made earlier about some of the tensions that came up in community when the Detroit is the new Black kind of phrase came into community, and just how you dealt with that. And I think when doing social impact and entrepreneurship work representative of community, trust building is so key. And it's clear that you've really built those partnerships and that trust. So I just love to hear, how that really came to be, and how did that trust building work as you were just entering that space?
Yeah. I think a lot of the reason the Black community has been so supportive of the brand is because they've really seen it grow from scratch. Like I literally was selling t-shirts out of my car in 2014. I was going to Eastern Market. I was at Dally in the Alley. I was at, all these different little pop-up events with my 6-foot table. And I was having these conversations, they know me personally because they bought the first shirt from me directly and asked me what it meant and asked me about my background. And I asked them, well, how does this make you feel? And what do you feel like the city needs, and how can I be supportive, or how can I contribute as someone coming in? So it was always a conversation, it was never just an assertion that I was making. It was, does this make sense? And is this something that can fit in the existing ecosystem? So I think just approaching it humbly and again, approaching it from the ground up and starting in the communities for them to see it go from that 6-foot table to a flagship store downtown. I think it creates a sense of team. Like we did this together, we got it here together. And I think we have to approach everything with that cultural sensitivity. Even if we do have the same skin color, we may not have been conditioned in the same culture necessarily. And so I think, again, it's having that sensitivity, willing to have those conversations, and just approaching it with a little bit more kindness.
Thank you so much. Absolutely appreciate your work.
Thank you for your question.
I have a quick follow-up to that, Roslyn. In terms of building that trust, what additional barriers did you face? Because you mentioned you weren't from Detroit originally, from Seattle originally. So what additional barriers did you face not actually being from here?
I think just I just think acceptance. It took a while for people to get comfortable with me being here. Is she going to stay here? Is she coming just to, make a buck and then leave? So I think it's just the barrier of being accepted and being recognized as legitimate and someone that's, here attempting to do the work and wanting to do the right thing. So I think that barrier, in the first 3 years was something very, very real that I had to overcome. But again, over time, people see your heart, they see your work, they see the outcome, and that begins to soften a little bit. But that was a sort of an uphill battle from the beginning.
Mm-hmm. So we have another question here from Keelan. I hope I'm pronouncing that right.
Yeah, no, that's right. And keeping on the Detroit theme, I would just love to hear how you imagine the future of Detroit. So like, what would you like to see from, the business community that would support Black communities and like Detroit's revitalization and not just lead to more gentrification, which will, displace those same communities?
Yeah, I think, So Detroit started to hit an upswing 2015, 2016. The narrative in national press was really exciting. Detroit's place to be. Like a lot of people moved here, and then around 2018, 2019, people actually started to leave. And reason being, from an infrastructure standpoint, it's exciting to be in Detroit, and there's a lot of good here, but the infrastructure is not as robust as it could be, and it doesn't support different amenities like a school system, quite frankly. So people want to move here. There's talent from all over the country. They want to work, they want to invest, but there's nowhere to send their kids to school, or there isn't enough sort of governmental, support for these families to stay here. So people are leaving. So I think for the future of Detroit, to really, I think, be a positive one, the business community has to support the education. That really is going to be where it starts and what's going to make the difference. If we can't train, if the education system doesn't have the tools to train up the future of Detroit, and the talent that wants to come into to Detroit with families can't support their own youth within the city, I think it's not going to be a sustainable living environment for anyone. So I think it's education, and that's really where I think businesses can have a huge impact.
Thank you, Keelan.
Thank you, Keelan.
We are going to bring up Chiamaka. Hope I pronounced that correctly.
Hi.
Yes, you did. Hi. Thank you both for this wonderful discussion. So I wanted to ask, just generally, what advice do you have for Black scholars who are searching for ways to impact their communities through, I guess, like an authentic purpose? And then a follow-up to that is, what did that look and feel like for you? So if you ever felt like doubt or discouraged, or if you kind of had this like maybe this central feeling like, okay, I know I'm following my purpose authentically and this is what I want to do, was that always in the background?
Um, Yes, it was always in the background. And for me, and I just kind of always had that guiding light of like, I'm supposed to do retail and I'm supposed to connect people, like that has just always been the baseline. And so I've always gone back to that. But I think something that, Black scholars and, you know, Black people with a lot of business sort of expertise and talented 10th really is what I kind of call this group of people. It's like I think we can leave some money on the table. I think that's how it's like, that's really what it's going to be, because a lot of us could make a lot of money in a lot of different cities and different careers and jobs. But the work that has to be done isn't always a high paying work, and it's difficult work. It's work that happens over time. And so it's a long game. And so I think we have to kind of shift our minds into this space of just doing the work because that's what you do, and that's what you're driven and that's what you're called to do, and not, always looking for a return. And I think the return sometimes is really pressing because of student loans and all these different things that cost to kind of get you to where you are. But I do think there's something to, leaving some dollars on the table, and doing it from a core of, this is what I'm called to do, and this is what this city needs, or this is what this community needs. And I think it's also, we can be so learned in our academia or in our specific worlds that we can go into a situation with an idea of what something needs and project that onto, instead of being really open to listening and just observing, and taking a second to say, well, what do you need? How can I support? Is it dollars? Is it, educational programming? Is it food? Is it water in Flint? It's like, what does this space need, and how can I use my expertise to be able to address that?
Thank you. That hits deeply.
Yeah,
Trying to balance making the coin, but also doing the work that matters.
I
I
get
really
it.
appreciate that.
I get it. I wanted to sell silk dresses. I came to Detroit. I'm like, I'm going to do a brand called Roslyn Karamoko, and it's going to be $400 silk dresses. It's like that was what I wanted to project onto it. But I got here and it's like, no, girl, like $30 t-shirts are expensive, and like people don't really need your dresses. It's like they need this conversation, and they need this model, and they need this work from you. And so it's really getting over yourself and like doing what it requires.
Thank you. Thank you for that.
Yeah, good luck.
Thank you so much for that question. I'm gonna, and we have Donald Lindsay here.
Hey, Donald.
Hey, what's going on? Thank you for allowing me to ask a question and for all the insights that you've given so far. To something that you said earlier about somewhat, to some extent, the untapped potential that exists in Detroit and trying to attract Black talent to be there. You made a reference about how people, professionals looking to move there, maybe they don't have the infrastructure. For example, in school, the school systems may not be in the state that you would like them to be. But it had me thinking, it kind of puts us in a chicken versus the egg scenario, in that the dollars won't be there if people don't show the demand and the need for it to warrant it. So how do you think we could best maybe reshift our perspective to encourage people to to challenge that narrative a little bit and give places like Detroit stronger consideration so that we can see it flourish to what it can be and has been?
Yeah, I think that's a great point, and I think that's the chicken and egg loop that Detroit has been in for such a long time. It's just been sort of this circular thing that's been happening for the last 30 years. But I think it's encouraging people to stay. And again, like fighting through the school system issue, or finding a charter school, or just finding a different way, a workaround, really, to stay, to really like release some of those comforts or some of those things you may be accustomed to, or you may want for your kids, when maybe a different experience might help them better to go into the future, or a different perspective might help them to be more sensitive to areas and ways of growing up that maybe they wouldn't understand otherwise. So I think it's really encouraging, our counterparts to stick it out, and don't. It's not always comfortable, and so just encouraging them to maybe get uncomfortable for the greater good, I think is something that we can do. But I think that's a great point, and that's exactly why Detroit has struggled over the years to kind of move forward, because it's always been that tax-based build, and not being able to get there to really see the push in infrastructure development.
Thank you so much, Donald. And thank you, Roslyn. I think we are going to close here shortly. But I just wanted to ask you, if you had to encapsulate this conversation into either one sentence, one phrase, what is your what is the one thing that you want us as an audience to take away from this conversation about you, about your business, and about this community impact that you've truly been able to have?
Yeah, I think it's give back, let that be the starting point, not as an afterthought, not as a marketing tool. I think really starting, businesses either as social enterprise, or just with a greater goal to help the larger diaspora. I think that really is the message, and it's It's difficult work. It's not always rewarding work, but it's the right work, and I think that's how we're going to see our futures change. So that would be my sort of if you got anything from this, it's give back and do it in a way that's going to impact the greater community.
Great. Well, thank you, Roslyn, so much. It's always good to catch up and connect with Howard fam. It was a pleasure having you here today at the 45th Annual Alfred L. Edwards Conference, and we're excited for the rest of the afternoon.
Thank you. Good to meet all of you. Thanks for your questions.
Thanks, guys. And just a quick note for everyone, we're about to head into a 15-minute break. If you guys could head over to your schedule and to your agenda and select the panels that you would like to attend for the rest of the afternoon, you can go ahead and do that now. Thank you so much for joining us and enjoy the rest of the conference.